today's video, I thought that I would just do a quick little sit down chat and talk you through some of the things that I have learned so far on my journey to becoming a self-taught barista. So I'm thinking that as well as doing my updates where I actually show you on the coffee machine where I'm at, I thought that I could also just do some short videos in between those ones and just talk about some of the things that I've learned and some cool facts that I have found along the way. So yeah, this won't be a massively long video. I will add in some footage of me making a coffee this week. I'm trying out a few different coffees now. I've learned in the last week sort of what you need for like an espresso coffee and what you need to find in a coffee that you're going to use for like lattes and stuff. I know that in a specialty cafe they probably just use, well, they will just use the same coffee for all of those things, but yeah, in actual fact I sort of was looking into how to make my flat whites stronger. I think that's like a funny word when people say stronger, that they don't always know what they mean by that. What I mean is like a richer drink. Yeah, I'll get onto that. So I'll just actually mention quickly as well that I have been getting most of my information from the James Hoffmann World Atlas of Coffee. That's been a really useful book in learning about all the different types of coffee and different processing and different ways to make coffee. And then I've also just been looking online, any links that I have found, like facts or figures from or whatever, I will put into the description box below. Yeah, so I've just literally been reading that book and googling stuff to find out more. So first things first, what actually is coffee? I don't feel like a lot of people know exactly what coffee is. I certainly did not when I first started doing all this. I knew it was a bean, but I didn't really know how that bean grew or even really where they came from, that kind of thing. So yes, what we buy and use to make coffee is a bean. It actually comes from fruit, so coffee cherry, and it literally does grow on trees. So I'll pop a picture up of what a coffee tree looks like, or a coffee cherry looks like, so you can see. I had no idea that that was where they came from or what they look like. I thought that was pretty cool. There's actually two main species of the coffee tree, so those being Arabica or Arabica? Arabica. We'll go with Arabica. So Arabica coffee tends to be sweeter, more sugary, more berry-like flavours, has a higher acidity, which I think contributes towards the sweetness of it. Specialty coffee tends to be Arabica coffee. It's seen now as like the higher end one. And then Robusta is stronger, harsher, higher in caffeine, and also obviously lower in acidity than Arabica. So that might be seen as like a more bitter tasting coffee, and generally just not quite as nice as the Arabica. And this is used generally in like supermarket coffees, mass-produced coffee basically. So I read that because beforehand coffee producers just wanted to sell as much as they could, and that was sort of how they made their money. It wasn't really a thing yet where people would be willing to pay a higher price for a smaller yield that was actually better in quality. That wasn't really a thing until fairly recently, I think. Yeah, they would just want to plant trees that had the highest yield, therefore to make, you know, more money. But actually I think now it is seen as more profitable to sort of plant trees that will produce really high quality stuff, even if that means less yield, because people will still pay a higher price for it. So I thought that was pretty cool. There are, however, some Robusta trees that are of a high quality. and they are valued for their deep flavoured espressos. So the difference between an Arabica and a Robusta espresso, my understanding would be that an Arabica one would feel like really light and have a really sweet flavour and be almost like a tea in terms of like the weight of it and how it looks. And then a Robusta would be like darker, heavier, more body, I think is the correct term, and the taste would be, yeah, just a lot stronger and just not as sweet. However, obviously all of this is dependent on people's preference. So some people obviously will prefer a Robusta coffee, and a lot of people will prefer an Arabica coffee. It just really depends on what you prefer. My understanding also of the reasoning behind Robusta being used in supermarket coffee and like mass-produced coffee is that it is easier to grow than Arabica. It can survive at lower altitudes, so higher temperatures, and they're less vulnerable to sort of like diseases, and they grow more quickly, and as I mentioned, they produce a higher yield. Robusta is predominantly grown in Africa and Indonesia, and then Arabica coffee is predominantly grown in Latin America. And yeah, as I mentioned, what you think is the better option will just depend on your taste profile. Personally, taste preference even, what I prefer would be an Arabica, just because I do prefer that sweeter taste, especially as an espresso. But yeah, you might prefer a Robusta. To the coffee cherry, the size of a coffee cherry is a similar size to a small grape, so probably about that big, and it's actually mostly seed. So there's two very big seeds in the middle, and then like a thin layer, flesh I think is called, and then obviously the outer layer, and they're usually a deep red when they are ripe. Some trees, however, are a yellow colour, and then you get some which are like a cross hybrid breed, I think it's called, of red and yellow, and they turn out orange. Coffee producers will usually plant red fruiting trees because they're easier to tell when they are ripe than a yellow one. I guess the red goes from a light red to a deep red, whereas the yellow is probably just yellow, the same sort of yellow all the way through. And the coffee producers have to make a decision on whether they will pick all of the coffee cherries at once, which can lead to some being overripe or underripe, because they obviously ripen at different times, but it's cheaper to pay the pickers to just go through the trees one time, pick everything, and discard the ones that are underripe. Or they decide to pay the pickers multiple times and go through the trees multiple times to only pick the ripe ones. And I guess that they have to just weigh up which one's going to be more cost effective. That actually gives me major flashbacks to when I was in Australia last year doing fruit picking. I picked a few different things, but I picked chilies, like red chilies, like really little ones. I did big ones and then really little ones, like bird's eye chilies, and there was loads, like hundreds and hundreds on one bush, and we would go through and pick only the ripe ones, and then like the next week we'd have to go through and do exactly the same bushes again, picking only the ripe ones, and it was just like Groundhog Day, because we were just going through the same line of bushes every single week. So yeah, that really reminds me of that. I think I'm traumatized. The more ripe the coffee cherry is, the sweeter it will be, and then if it's sweeter, that contributes to a sweeter tasting liquid coffee in the long run. So they want to be picking them at the right time, and I guess some producers will really care about that, and they'll be really picky about when they pick them, and then some producers probably won't really care too much. They'll pick them all and they'll just write off whatever is unusable. And then yeah, as I mentioned, the coffee cherry has 2 seeds inside, and those seeds are what will become the bean that we know and that we use. Okay, so moving on, the first tree ever produced was in Ethiopia, and those trees still actually exist and are produced today, and the name that those trees are given is Typica. So that is a variety of coffee, and it's actually widely grown, so that's kind of like the OG coffee. And is basically where all other coffee has like developed through, like a family tree with Typica being at the top, and then all the different types of coffee have sort of developed down from there. Yeah, now there's many different types of coffee, all very similar, I believe. Some are like natural mutations, so like natural selection, natural selection or natural breeding. Some is selective breeding or crossbreeding, so like taking Typica and then another type, breeding those two together to create a different type of coffee, very similar to like dog crossbreeding, that kind of thing. So yeah, I won't go through like literally every single different type of coffee. There are a lot, but I've got a few written down which I will just read out. So Typica and Bourbon, I believe, are the two sort of main ones. Bourbon was a natural mutation of the Typica tree, meaning it mutated like in the wild, like it wasn't humans that created it. The yield is much higher than the Typica. So I think once they started to realise that, they planted lots more of the Bourbon type, and it kind of has grown from there. From what I've read though, they're not produced as highly anymore. Yeah, so that's what I was saying before actually about the market not being at a stage where people were willing to pay more for less yield. So because the Bourbon tree produced a really high yield, people planted loads because they were like, we'll make loads of money because we can sell loads of coffee. But now that, as I said, we're at a place where people will pay more money for less yield but higher quality, the Bourbon tree is not planted as often. And so then the geisha I was already aware of, I think because it's picked up in popularity in the last few years, and that is because of its like overwhelming floral undertone. I think, yeah, again, it all links to people wanting to have a higher quality, more sweet coffee. I think it first started gaining popularity as well because it was quite an unusual tasting coffee. I'll just talk quickly about Mundo Novo, and I'll talk about this one because this is quite a good one for understanding how the sort of, as I call it, the family tree works. So like the Typica was the OG, as I said, the main one, and then that naturally mutated into the Bourbon, and then the Bourbon and the Typica mutated sort of together naturally, and that became like a hybrid, and that is called Mundo Novo. And again, that one has quite a high yield. It's disease resistant, does well and can do well in lower altitudes, so higher temperatures. And there's another type called Caturra, which is actually I think that's one type of bean that was in the Grindsmith coffee I was using in my last video, which is cool. And again, looking at the family tree, you've got Typica, Bourbon. The Caturra is a mutation of just the Bourbon. That is again a natural mutation, not a man-made one. And this one again has a high yield, however it can succumb to being overgrown, and if it overgrows without sort of being managed properly, the plant will just die, which is obviously not ideal. And the Caturra tree also is very small. They are easier to pick by hand. That's the positive of the Caturra tree, I guess. So now in the family tree we've got the Caturra, which is coming off the Bourbon, and we've got the Mundo Novo, which has come from Typica and Bourbon, and then the the Mundo Novo and the Caturra have been mutated, and this is a man-made mutation, so this is the first man-made mutation that I've talked about. So it was mutated, man-made, in Brazil to create Catuai, which is the other one that was in the Grindsmith coffee that I was talking about. and correct me if I'm saying that incorrectly, I should have checked before I started filming this. It was selectively mutated, selectively bred, because they wanted to take the short tree element of the Caturra and the high yield element of the Mundo Novo and bring those together to create a short, high yield coffee tree. So yeah, that's just a few of the different varieties. There's like so many more, but I won't sit here and go on and on about them. That's just a few of the main ones that I've sort of learned about this week, and I thought that was quite interesting and quite a good way of understanding the like the development of new strands of coffee, as like a family tree where you start off with one and you end up with like the grandchildren. Yeah, so I hope that was well explained for you. Apologies if it's not the first time I've done a video like this, and I'm maybe mumbling my words up a little bit, but I'll hopefully get better with practice. So it's also good to know that those different varieties will all have different qualities within them that make them better for certain things. So for example, as I mentioned, the geisha being very like florally, the way that will be roasted is most likely going to be a light roast, because, and that's obviously the roastery that sort all of that out, but again, just good thing to know. They'll do a light roast because if they do a dark roast, they'll just sort of kill all the flavours, I think. And so those types of coffees will be best drank as an espresso or as like a short black coffee, because the flavours aren't super strong, they're just very delicate. Something like the Mundo Novo, I could be wrong on this, but from what I've gathered, that type of coffee would be better at a darker roast, because there's not so many like delicate flavours there, and the roasting process doesn't have to be as delicate either, because darker roast coffees are the ones that will be better for a milk drink, because the flavours are a lot stronger, are a lot richer, and the body is heavier, and so when you add milk, the milk doesn't totally like overtake the flavours. Whereas if you were to put milk, like make a geisha into a latte for example, I don't think you would get any of those floral flavours in the milk drink. The milk would just kind of overpower it, so you're better off drinking that as just like an espresso or a small black coffee, like I said. So that was something else that I learned this week, because I have been obviously using that Grindsmith coffee that was in the last video, and also I bought one from Dark Arts Coffee, which I got from a coffee shop called Brew and Brownie in York, which is really nice. That is a little bit more heavy in the body, it's more like nutty, which is why I went for it, because I went in and they offered me 3 different types of coffee, and the other 2 were both sounded fairly similar to the Grindsmith one. I wanted to try something else, and he said that it was more of like a nutty flavour, so I went for that one. But it is still fairly delicate, so when I'm adding milk to both that one and the Grindsmith one, the coffee flavour just isn't coming through. It's not very strong again, not very rich in flavour anyway. It's more milky than it is coffee. Yeah, so they're both really nice as just a plain black coffee, and I almost feel like adding milk ruins them. So I have decided to just order another bag of those Amazon beans, because they are a dark roast and they're cheaper. I feel like I can make them into like a flat white, and it will still taste nice, and then I can just use the really nice beans that I get from the small cafes and just have those as espresso or small black coffees, because I can appreciate them a little bit more like that. And yeah, so that's just another thing that I have learned this week, and where I'm at with like milk drinks and espressos and stuff. Do let me know actually if you have any recommendations for dark roast coffee. But yeah, I can buy in maybe like a bigger bag than the usual 250, 500 or even a kilogram of it would be good, because I'm not quite sure that the Amazon beans are like the best that I could be using. If you know any dark roast coffee that's not like super expensive, I would appreciate if you left me a comment, a recommendation for that. And yeah, I hope that you have found that video slightly helpful. If you didn't know anything about the varieties of coffee, maybe now you do. As I said, it's just a quick one because I'm not an expert. There's people on here that are so much more knowledgeable than me. I'm just literally talking about my journey and what I've learned so far, and that's what I have learned this week about the different varieties of coffee. And I thought that was quite interesting how it all sort of stems down from one particular variety, like a family tree. I think that's pretty cool. And yeah, just good to bear in mind when you're out buying coffee what kind of flavours you might be getting from a particular variety. Cool facts about coffee that I have learned this week. The Arabica plant is able to self-pollinate, so it will just continue to grow and pollinate as long as it is in a good condition. Coffee berries are known for their highly concentrated antioxidants, and some people even crush them up and then drink the juice for all those antioxidants. There's conflicting information online about when the first coffee house actually opened, but it seems to date back all the way to the 1500s, and people would, as we do today, gather in coffee houses to chat and have like political conversations. I think it was seen, if you're in a coffee house, that you were like quite intelligent. 1512 to 1524 in Mecca, which is in Saudi Arabia, coffee houses and coffee was actually banned because it was seen as like too political, like people were having too honest and open conversations and it was a threat basically. So yeah, they banned it, which I thought was a pretty cool fact. I hope you have enjoyed today's updates. I will do another video this week just on making a coffee and where I'm up to with that. I think I'm going to try out some different milks this week because I've literally only done Oatly Barista and that's been going pretty well. I still haven't quite got the full hang of it. Still working on that, but yeah, I think I might try a few different ones this week and just film how that goes. Yeah, so give this video a like if you enjoyed it, leave me a comment, share your thoughts on what I've talked about. If I've got anything wrong, please do let me know. I'll add on to anything that I've said about the varieties and how it all works. And yeah, subscribe to my channel, I would really appreciate that, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. See ya! That's nice. Maybe still a little bit too frothy, but pretty good. That's the best one I've done out of the Dark Arts coffee so far.